And at the end of it, Jim says, you know, these really aren't funny when they're read back to back to back like this. And that's the power of the awkward. It convicts us. We're left to sit with what we've done. I don't think that everything that's produced by Hollywood is Christian. I'm not trying to say that. I just think it's really hard to produce compelling stories that aren't the gospel. When you produce something that's artistically compelling that is not essentially a gospel story, it usually is nihilism.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Things You Don't Hear in Church podcast. My name is Ethan.
And my name is Derry. And guys, have you been on the internet? Because we're on there. We're literally everywhere. If you've been on there, you've probably seen us on there. Because again, we're everywhere. We're on all the platforms. We have extra content besides the podcast. Video form, audio form. We have shorts, reels. We're everywhere. Yeah. So if you want to find us, just go to whatever platform you want to right now and type in our name. Sometimes it's the acronym. Sometimes it's the full name. So you kind of got to figure that one out. But we're all over the place. And you can watch us on Spotify now. We've been on there for a little bit, but if you didn't know that, can you watch on Apple?
No, Apple's not like that.
Yeah, but guys,
I mean, maybe
we're still everywhere.
We upload to Spotify and then it gives it to Apple, so maybe they could. Yeah. Maybe Apple could, but Spotify doesn't let them. They just give them the audio file.
Sneaky Spotify.
Sneaky.
But yeah, we're everywhere. If you want extra content, we're out there. We love engaging with people. As soon as we have enough followers on YouTube, we'll start doing lives. I know YouTube's not our main source of views, but as soon as we get enough, we'll start doing lives and doing some interesting stuff.
Which means you have to send this to someone.
Yeah,
you have to stop listening on Spotify right now and go to YouTube and subscribe and send it to your best friend. If you want to see us do lives. I mean, what else?
Yeah.
If you don't, our feelings will be hurt.
Yeah, and we'll know if you don't also.
And I'm going to block you.
Yeah.
Well, guys, today we have a really fun episode. If you guys have ever seen The Lord of the Rings, good on you. If you haven't, bad on you.
I've seen Lord of the Beans.
Stop. It's not the same.
If
you've seen Lord of the Rings, you know how amazing and beautiful and just the great thing and gift from God that this series is. If you've seen The Office, you know how hilarious it is, how funny it is. And if you haven't seen The Office, I really don't know where you've been living, because it seems like everyone has seen it. Well, today we have a really fun special guest named Father Mark Bryans on the podcast today. He is an Anglican priest here in Hawaii. He holds a bachelor's and master's degree, I think both from Hawaii Pacific University. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. And he has written theological papers highlighting godly and theological themes in Lord of the Rings and The Office. And as soon as we heard this, I was like, immediately, we got to have him on the podcast to talk about it. I got to hear this.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
You know, I heard a little 5-minute SparkNotes version after he was done preaching at our campus, and it just got me stoked. So it's been a couple months in the work, but Father Mark, thank you for joining us. Is there anything that we missed that we need to address?
No, you're good. Maybe to clarify, my name is not Father Mark. My name is Mark, and in Anglicanism, people call me Father. It's just a term of endearment, affirmation. But that's not part of my name.
Yeah, it's not my father.
And then
that's not why I said it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. And then just for you guys let me know if the audio sounds strange. We do have a couple of kids moving around in the house, and my wife and I have 5 kids, expecting the 6th, and so it's not audio Foley that the hosts have put in there to make it sound like a home with a bunch of children, sort of like,
we just do it to be funny because we call you Father, so we have to put those in the background.
Right. No, I am both a real father. I do have children, and then I'm an Anglican pastor, but neither of those are actually my name. So
we'll just call you Father Mark.
As soon as I have kids, I'm gonna have people refer to me as Father Ethan.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
Well, you think about Abram's name, right? I mean, this is one of those. I think if we were more sensitive to the original language of some of the Bible is a hilarious book, right? We sometimes miss this. We come to it already assuming that it's sort of dour, right? And it's a book to be studied, right? We have Bible studies. We don't hold Bible delights. Bible is this hilarious book. If you think of Abram, his name means father. And he's this guy walking around with no children, and his name is Father. And people are like, what's your name? Abram. And then he has this encounter with God where he's like, I still am not a father, right? And God says, you have a new name. It's Abraham, right? Which is put a ha in the middle of his name. It's an intensification. You're great father. Can you imagine being Abraham showing up to a still barren Sarah and being like, oh, by the way, my name's not Father anymore. It's great Father. You know what I mean?
So basically, Abraham in modern times was named legitimately, hey, your name's Big Daddy.
Yeah.
Big Daddy.
Yeah, wow. That's right. Great grandpa. Great dad. So anyways.
Dave, I got some news.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Well, let's start off with The Office. I think that would be a good place to start because that's a show that I haven't seen. I'll be honest, I haven't seen every episode, although I've seen so much of like the broken up content on like YouTube and like TikTok and stuff. I feel like I've seen it all. I've seen quite a bit of it. I think Derry's seen it all.
Yeah, a few times.
I'm
a sinner.
Idolatry.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the one, like with Lord of the Rings, because it's written by J.R.R. Tolkien, everyone knows he was a Christian. A lot of people are told, oh yeah, there's very strong biblical overtones in it. But The Office is something that I feel like I was surprised to hear what could have theological undertones in it. So let's just dive into there. Yeah. Maybe how did you get this opportunity to write this paper? And then, what was the paper about? And then we'll just get it started.
Yeah. So the one sort of published item that I have on The Office is I gave a presentation a couple years ago at the Conference for Christianity and Literature on I'd been reading a lot of Bonhoeffer and had been rewatching The Office all the way through with my wife again for like 4 years ago. It was like maybe around our 5th or 6th time. Now I'm moving through it sort of, I don't know, maybe on my 10th or 11th time through it consecutively. Wow. I don't watch a whole lot of, there's not a whole lot of other things that I watch. So take all the time that you spend watching other things and movies and sort of compile it. And I was realizing there's a lot of these kind of themes, and I loved The Office for a long time. I grew up, when I was in high school was when The Office was still rolling out new episodes. And that was also like, I was in high school when Netflix was a thing that you subscribed to and got DVDs in the mail. Like, so before any of the advent of like what we're used to now, like streaming, I would tune in on Thursday nights to NBC and watch the next episode of The Office, and the commercial would come on and you'd run to the bathroom, you'd like just try to go as fast as you can so you can come back and not miss, the next opening scene. These is a forgotten era of television. Loved The Office. I was really moved. I remember the first time, like a lot of people, I had sort of watched it and stopped when Michael left, and was really moved watching it again later on in life with my wife, watching it all the way through for the first time, and sort of seeing the finale episode and realizing, oh my gosh, so much of this is Christian. It ends with a wedding. They're reading verbatim from the Song of Solomon. They're standing in their graves because they believe love is until death does your death, you're separated by death. They have like a Christian minister standing there and like reading to them from the Bible. What other TV show that's produced by like NBC or other equivalent media giants is producing a TV show where the final episode is a Christian wedding where they read scripture and it's not a joke and it's just beautiful and you're crying? This is phenomenal. There's nowhere else that this happens. And so that got me thinking, and I was reading a lot of Bonhoeffer, presented this sort of paper at this Conference of Christianity and Literature, sat on it for a while, and then just kept growing and sort of gave a talk at a local high school here, and sort of, it kind of kept morphing and the project expanded. Then most recently, I was a part of a group of sort of scholars and thinkers that put together an edited volume on theology, religion, and The Office. That'll be coming out later this year from Lexington Books and Fortress Press. And so that was the long story of the genesis of it. So that's the sort of last thing I've done that works with The Office. But I have a dream to produce by the end of my life sort of a theological commentary on The Office in 9 volumes, right? In the same way that you read theological commentaries, you have a book. I think there's enough there to make it work. And I'd love to see it happen. But I don't have the time for that right now. So
would you go episode by episode?
That'll be my retirement project. What's that?
You go every episode, you would do a commentary on.
Yeah, and then and I think the Office is something deep enough to do a project like that. Yeah, and you can just like we do in ours later on in John, we'll see that, but so there's sort of this intertextual cross referencing, and the Office works the same way. There's things that foreshadow other events, things that are followed up on, loose threads that you think are never going to be solved that end up being resolved, and yeah. So
would you do video commentary or written?
Written. I'm not like you guys, man. I'm not technologically savvy, so it would be like a book,
cool.
like a book.
Yeah.
That'd be super cool. Like having that on your shelf of full of theological books, and The Office.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Maybe we'll just do 3 volumes or something, but 3 volumes. But we'll try to go through the whole season.
Yeah.
You could have family Bible studies through the Office. Like you watch the episode, and then you read Father Mark's expository Office commentary.
Yeah, and then you could this is a little bit more on the joking side, but yeah, you could have prayers like, and now pray together. Our Father, we pray that you deliver us from being like Ryan Howard. We pray that you help us to be faithful to the things we've said we would do, like Dwight. These sort of. No, nothing like that. I just think I think that there's enough. Sort of going back to the question about The Office and Christian literature, and maybe this will drive us back to what we're talking about. Is I think that it's easy. You can do it with a lot of things. You can find some kind of Christian theme in it, right? So like, oh, look, that guy laid down his life for his friends. That's a Christian thing. That's a Christian. There's Christian elements there that are present in this otherwise not really Christian thing. And I think there's Christian elements in The Office, but I also think there's something different about The Office, more than just Christian things being present. I think that structurally, aesthetically, structurally, cinematically, there are some pieces that to me make it Christian in a way that other things aren't. And then also in terms of the overarching story, these aren't just sort of elements that appear. There's a fundamental sort of Christian structure to The Office. And I know it's like, multiple writers, multiple directors. Each season had a different showrunner. It's based on a British series. And so I know all that, but I think whether or not all these people were intentionally working in concert is a little bit besides the point, insofar as, even if they didn't intend this, what does it mean though? Now that it's completed, what does this thing mean as a canonical 9 seasons? And I think the big superstructure of The Office is Christian, and I think there's elements all up and down it that are Christian all the way through.
Cool. Well, can we get into that a little bit? Maybe more of the overarching structure of what you see as Christian in it.
Yeah. So maybe I'll back up one more. I'll answer the question, but I'll sort of maybe a prior thing is I think even the structure of it, the meta narrative structure of The Office, the idea of doing a documentary, right? There's some really interesting things there. A couple things that differentiate. You have to think again. 2000s and NBC, otherwise, whatever else was on the docket for NBC's television programming, were of the kind of like reality TV show, right? Where you have the confessionals, the talking head scenes, or you had, and we all kind of know it's fake. Like these are actual actresses and actors that get cast to be the cast of Survivor, or what's the scary one? Where like you would be given scary things to do. Yeah, Fear Factor, right? The Apprentice, these sort of shows. And yet there was always kind of a staged element to it. Like what it did was it pretended at reality, but you could feel like this is a show. Like there are cameras here, right? So those things to me feel a little bit dishonest, right? So pretending at live, but it's really not live. Like these are actors and actresses. This is a show. There are showrunners and there are directors. Like, which reality doesn't need? Or on the other hand, when The Office first came out in the U.S., you have like comedy shows. You can think of Seinfeld, Everybody Loves Raymond, King of Queens. And these run, even some of the more avant-garde ones still run on a laugh track.
Mm-hmm.
So the audience, and the laugh track does something that's not. So The Office did this thing where it chose to mimic the documentary reality, so that we got to have a different kind of TV show where people could speak directly at the camera, break that third wall, in a way that was honest about its dishonesty, kind of. And then secondly, the removal of the laugh track does something to comedy. The removal of the laugh track made the moments awkward, right? It didn't cover up. If an awkward thing happens, there's a laugh track. Okay, ha ha ha. I'm now laughing in the company of people, and I'm obeying what the show is telling me to do, right? The show is saying, this is funny, you can laugh now. The absence of a laugh track, and what The Office is famous for, is those deadpan silences that just leave me alone in the awkwardness of the moment. That is something different to the audience. I sit there and I go, oh God, right? Oh, and it almost really does come out as a prayer, right? Oh, I know this is a TV show, but oh dear Lord, please bless this man who is humiliating himself or whatever else, right? There is this kind of unction that rises up. We don't know what to do. We kind of laugh, maybe. Sometimes we burst out laughing, and then we feel bad for it. So even structurally, it makes room for us to sit in the silence. And that impulse alone, to me, feels very Christian. It leads for me to evaluate. It causes a rupture in the flow of the narrative, right? I don't just laugh through it, and I don't just move on to the next scene. Think of Seinfeld, which is a great show, but it really is just little sort of vignettes, almost self-contained comedy skits, sutured together by a laugh track, disconnected generally from maybe there's a big overarching theme to the episode, but the theme is relatively unimportant. You can think of like Friends, the one where, right, it's just defined by a couple of things that happen, right? And it's sutured together by a laugh track. The Office leaves you to stew in the awkwardness of its moments. And that's a really daring thing to do. Because what that means is that when something bad happens, I don't just laugh past it. I go, oh. In the pilot episode, when Michael pretends to fire Pam and Pam starts weeping, I don't just kind of laugh through it. I actually have to pause and I go, actually, that's not acceptable. Oh man, sin is exposed as really sinful, right? Sin is exposed as sin. Oh my gosh, I feel convicted. I laugh, then I go, oh, and then there's this moment in the office where I realize I'm Michael. I see so much of my own failures in Michael. Or I go, man, Michael's just like the guy that I know. So then it immediately becomes a part of my life, and I then have to deal with sort of this conviction. A lot of people go, I don't like The Office. People that don't like The Office will often say something like, because it's just like the awkwardness, and I didn't like that. They don't like that kind of naked, exposed place of sitting in silence. And so I think there's a kind of Christianity at its basis is calls us to that place of sitting awkward, sitting in silence. So that's the meta structure. The narrative is brilliant. The Office tells a story about a bunch of Christians. We find out in season 3, I think it's episode 1 and 2 of season 3. No. Hold on, I have a list right here. Yeah, episode 1 and 2 of season 4. The 2 fun run episodes where Michael hits Meredith the car and she gets bit by a bat, and they find rabies and she goes to the hospital. And they do a fun run for the cure. Those 2 episodes are interesting. There's a conversation that's really informative there, where Michael goes, "We should all just talk about our religions, right?" And Toby says, the HR guy says, "No, oh God, we can't do that in the office. That might be great." And Michael says, "No," right? And everybody goes around, and with the exception of Kelly, who says she's Hindu, but she's actually not sure what that means, and so she might not actually be Hindu, we realize that all of these people are Christian. Stanley's Catholic, Pam and Daryl are Presbyterian, right? They go around the room. Phyllis says, I'm a Lutheran, but Bob's a Unitarian, so it keeps things spicy, right? We're going to say, wow, all these people are Christian, and they might
That's
be
insane.
they might be
Yeah.
heretically Christian. Unitarians, right? Like
Right.
that's kind of a Christian heresy, right? Okay, so then the office tells me the office is telling a story not about not Christians. The office is telling a story about a bunch of bad, recalcitrant Christians that are struggling with what it means to lay down their lives and love one another. That sounds a lot like me. I am a Christian who lives in this postmodern era, who is struggling with what it means to truly follow Christ and to lay down my life and to love others. Okay, this is a story then about discipleship. And all of the awkwardness and all of this awkward silences are moments where the Spirit moves and either people respond to the awkwardness by transformation and grace and confession, or people deny, they resist the awkwardness of the other person. Other people are incredibly awkward, right? I could be such a holy person if I wasn't surrounded by miserable, awkward human beings, right? And the gospel calls us to an encounter with the other person. And in that place, Christ forms in us a truer and more real disciple that we're supposed to be. So that's like the meta arc. And so you see all these big arcs. The question in the office is, when they're confronted with the awkward, how do they respond to the awkwardness of the other person? And those who deny the awkwardness of the other person, those who try to control and managerially sequester the awkwardness of dealing with real people, dealing with broken Christians, are the bad guys. And their road does not lead to redemption. So if you think of Ryan Howard, Jan Levinson, Robert California, D'Angelo Vickers, Charles Minor, right? All the bad guys in the office are all people that come in and say, no, the good life is not to be found in engaging with awkward discipleship among broken Christians. The good life is to be found with people being divided by cubicles and HR laws, and as long as we're successful and profitable and we make money, people will be happy. And Michael challenges that. And anybody that allows themselves to be transformed by that awkwardness is glorified, is justified and glorified. They get married. Tell me about another story that begins with broken, sinful, fallen humans who can't get along and hate each other, and ends with a glorious bridegroom and a wedding. Do you guys know of a book like that?
A couple.
I think of one.
If only there was a great theological book that began with broken, fallen humans and ends with a wedding. It would be wonderful.
Right.
Wow.
That's cool. And so what episode specifically in the paper were you covering? And then, because you covered a specific or a couple episodes, was it one or a few?
Yeah, I kind of moved all the way through. I just looked at the way in which the awkward, sort of what I just said. Like, the last paper was just looking at the way the awkward transforms the characters and sort of looking at the broad scope of things.
Man, I love that. That's so good, because it was like, like we are supposed to sit with the awkward, and there's times when there's people that you have to have a conversation with that you don't really want to have a conversation with because you know it's going to be awkward. And that's like, that's something that like I love about YWAM is like whenever someone has a problem with someone else, the most common response is, well, did you talk to them? And living in the community in that capacity, we're forced to have those situations. And so, that's such a really cool way to look at it that I haven't ever done before, which I also think is a credit to, in my experience of talking with you and Father Joe. It seems like Anglicans have a way of looking at the world in which they see God in everything, which I think is super amazing. Because like that, I'm like, that just blew me away, and I'm like, wow, I never would have thought about that.
Yeah, so there's two episodes in particular that we can maybe look at and just deepen on this. One would be the pilot, and then one would be season 2, episode 27, conflict resolution. And in the pilot, Michael is this vicious. By vicious, I mean the opposite of virtuous, right? He's full of vices. He's a vicious human, controlled under the dominion of the flesh and the world. and everything he deals is death to others, right? But he says one right thing, and it's at the end of the pilot, and he says, I don't know the exact quote off the top of my head, but it's something like, within 2 words of being the exact same as, what makes a company profitable? Is it the cash flow? Is it the money? It's the people. The people. And that sort of is a very radical claim to make in corporate America. Right? It's a divergence. No, actually, people are what make a business flourish. And that, there's a reason why Dunder Mifflin Scranton, for all of its failures, is the most successful branch in Dunder Mifflin history, and the only one that actually makes it to the end. Right? Is bought out again. It's the only successful branch. Precisely because they didn't put money first. Precisely because they put people first. It is the one that succeeds. And one way that we see this happen in a really unique way is in season 2, episode 27, conflict resolution. I think of the one scene where they read all of Jim's pranks on Dwight back to back successively.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, Jim says, these really aren't funny when they're read back to back like this. And that's the power of the awkward. It convicts us. We're left to sit with what we've done. We don't just move on with HR processes or move on with a laugh track. We have to engage with the cross of other people.
Really interesting. Is there any small areas in the show where you see symbolism that you think is really interesting? One connection that I'm sure you've made, I don't know, maybe there isn't a connection here, but Michael leaving to Michael coming back, to me, because it's 3 seasons, is kind of seems like a reference to Christ or to Christ's return, which is a more obvious one, it seems like, with the wedding at least, to Scripture. Yeah. But both those kind of strike me at first. What do you think?
Yeah, there's great. We'll dig in there. There's everything you said, I think I agree with, right? Michael as a kind of Christian figure, right? And by Christian figure, we mean somebody who ends up symbolizing Christ. Yeah, so Michael as a Christ figure, I think people misunderstand the term, sometimes Christ figure. In literature or film, it doesn't mean somebody who's perfect all the time. Christ is perfect. But a Christ figure means somebody, as weak as they may be, through whom we see a picture of Christ. Right? Christ's strength is made perfect in our weakness. And so you can have Christ figures like Frodo Baggins as a Christ figure. Though he makes mistakes, there are errors in judgment, and he at the end sort of even falls and puts the ring on his own finger, right? He can still be a Christ figure, because what it means to be a Christ figure is not that you're perfect, right? But that the image of Christ is magnified in you. Michael becomes a Christ figure, not because everything he does is right, or because most of the stuff he does is not right for the first 5 seasons. But because what happens to him at the end, his story then takes on. His story is sort of like hammered metal. His story is beaten into the shape of Christ. His story is refined into the image of Christ. Just like my story and your story, we, Lord willing, are becoming more and more shaped by the image of Christ. Michael is somebody who we do not trust around women for the first 5 seasons.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not until season 6, episode 26, after he's lost Holly, and we were not rooting for him to fall in love with Holly. We loved Holly. We didn't want her to be hurt by Michael, right? We were glad when she left. Go, run away, right? A transformation happens in Michael in season 6, and 2 things happen. One is he sees Holly again with her boyfriend at the company picnic, and he doesn't make a move. He tries to the beginning, but he leaves her. He says, you know what? He trusts her to Providence's hands. That's huge. That's a different Michael. And then at the end of season 6, episode 26 of season 6, is when they have the printer fiasco. There's a bad the printers are exploding, the Sabre printers, and they need somebody to take the fall for it. And Joanne Bennett, the company director, says, I can't take the fall for this. And he says, of his own free will, I'll take the fall for this. And all of a sudden, Holly comes back. And we now trust Michael with Holly. Well, what happened? Michael laid his life down.
Wow.
Wow.
Right, and now he can rise up again. And this follows the story of Adam and Eve. Adam is not good by himself, and God takes Adam and he lays him down, puts him into a deep sleep. Right, that occurs elsewhere in the Old Testament. It means he's dead. Right, and he rips Adam open. This is death. Right. Well, Mark, it doesn't say death. Yeah, okay. You're laying on the ground in a deep sleep. You're unconscious, and I rip your side open.
Oh, so
Are
you
you
do
alive,
believe in
or
soul sleep?
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, are you alive? No, I think you're. God slays Adam, but then Adam rises back up again, and there's Eve. Right? He lays his life down, and there's Eve. Just
That's
like the
cool.
final Adam, Jesus, lays his life down, and he rises again. And when he comes out of the tomb, who's there? Mary Magdalene, right? As a picture of the church. The second Adam, his bride, the church, is there, and they're in a garden, and that's why Christ looks at her and says, "Woman," because Mary is a woman, but also because the church is his bride, and he's the new Adam. Michael Scott lays his life down, rises again, and now he trusts him with Holly, and then he disappears. Right, he ascends. He's literally going to Colorado, right, which is geographically at a higher elevation than Scranton, right?
Yeah.
We forget Michael literally ascends. And his departure, he has his disciple, Pam, meet him at the airport before he gets on a plane and ascends to go away. It's like, and you can say, well, I'm not sure. Okay, well, there, yeah, you tell me a different way to how to read that, right? But these are the things that are there. This is present. This is a possible reading. Then Michael returns and he shows up at Dwight's wedding, right? And one of the final things that's beautiful there is he returns and it's a wedding. It's a joyous feast. But the best man part that Jim was supposed to fill in Dwight's sort of like pseudo Amish patois is called the bestish mensch. Bestish mensch. And I think of in the philosophical world, we know the phrase Übermensch. Right, which is what bestish is kind of an English version of Übermensch. This is a Nietzschean idea of the superhuman. This is the Nazi ideal. This is like the political theology of Carl Schmitt, like that there would be the perfect monarchic Übermensch who could do whatever whose superiority validates whatever he wants to do. And if you think of the old Dwight and the old Michael, their superiority validated the unethical things they want to do. Jim is the bestish mensch, and Dwight is the bridegroom. And Jim lays down the bestish mensch, and here's Michael, who has come not to be served, but to serve, right? To sort of show up. I'll be your bestish mensch. I'm here for you. And so even that is a kind of anti-Nietzschean turn that overthrows kind of modern nihilism in some pretty profound ways.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So, anyways, he returns, and his hair is white as snow.
Yeah.
And so there's some beautiful pieces there.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That's fascinating. Dang.
Wow.
Do you have a favorite episode of The Office?
Yeah, not counting the finale.
Right.
The finale is excellent. Yeah. I mean, there's another biblical reference. When Dwight pulls Angela over at the first part of the finale, right, and he proclaims over her, almost so closely, if you want to ignore it, you must willfully choose to be ignorant. He comes out of his car and he says, "I will raise all of your children with all of your lovers if you will be my bride." Right? It's like if you've read the book of Hosea, there is you cannot miss this. Right? This is how the season ends. So besides the finale, which is just fantastic, every part of it is so perfect. I would say there's several. The first one that comes to mind is the injury where Michael cooks his foot on a George Foreman grill. That one has one of the has one of the highest U.S. viewing ratings for season. I think that's the episode with the highest view count. I can look it up real quick. Yeah, in season 2, that's the highest. The injury, season 2, episode 12, has the highest sort of U.S. views.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's also a perfect episode. It's great.
Yeah. Why do you think that there are so many of these very obvious symbolisms in the show, whether it's a meta narrative or a symbol or just the overarching like view of the show? when it's not made by Christians. Like you would see something like this, and when you're explaining it, you're like, it has to be designed and orchestrated. But how so?
Or
how do you think that happens?
Or is it made by Christians? I don't know. I don't know the directors.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's great. It's not a Christian production house, right? So it's not like The
right.
Chosen, which Angel Studios, like sort of everybody there and his brother is Christian, and
right.
It's not that. And I don't think some of these people are Christian, but I would say one, I don't know they're not. And so maybe God told you that they aren't. Yeah, I just not to you, but I don't know. And I don't know the end of their story. Their stories, all of the producers like Mindy Kaling, BJ Novak, Michael Schur, Greg Daniels, Ken Kwapis. There's some of their stories aren't over, and their stories I don't know. Their stories might end with them being Christian. But regardless, I think we kind of live. People talk about a post-Christian era in America and England and maybe Western Europe, post-Christian, and I get what people mean by that. I would love to trouble that definition a little bit, insofar as I don't. It doesn't seem to take into account how radically the entire world, whether or not you are a Christian, how radically the entire order of the world changed after the death and resurrection of Jesus. Right. So for instance, like Richard Dawkins can say something like, I don't believe in God, who's this blah, 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 and he seems so immoral. According to what, Richard? According to the latent Judeo-biblical values that you implicitly contain because you're a child of a Christian era, right? And even some of the things that are putting Christians and non-Christians really at odds in some of our social and political settings, some of those conversations are difficult because the grounds that we're playing on, the rules of debate and the justice system, are deeply informed by the Christian faith. Not that all of it's Christian or whatever. So I think we're still living in you can't wash off the historical scars of Christendom, right? Like the gospel happened. We can't wash that away. The creator of the whole world died, right? Yahweh. I don't want to fall into patripassianism. The Son of God, the Logos himself, was crucified and died. The whole world, the whole geopolitical, and I would say biological, chemical, and physical world is different now than it was in 0 AD. And if you don't believe that, that's okay. I would have some other conversations with you about sort of about what it means to be a Christian if we don't sort of believe that the whole heavens and earth are fundamentally different because now a human body has ascended into heaven and rules on the throne of heaven, right? We're not living in the middle of the ascension. We're not waiting for Jesus to get up there. We are living in an era where a human body now forever dwells in the councils of the Trinity. This is a Christian era, man. Like things are different. We can't undo this, right? He didn't come back down. And so I think we live in a Christian era generally. I think a lot of the values, even non-Christian people, generally are like, I should be kind to people. Yeah, then that's not. I'm a descendant of Vikings, man. That's not a pagan Viking value, right? Like just be kind. You know what I mean? This is all Christian stuff, right?
Pillaging the village. Just be kind.
Yeah, just be kind. You know what I mean? Just control your.
Maybe the Canadian Vikings. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, maybe the Canadian. Yeah, some of this, right? But I think so many of it we're implicitly Christian. Secondly, there's this great. I forget the scholar's name, but she has this great phrase, which is, "The gospel is the story that can't not be told." The gospel is a story that can't not be told. It's so good. We either have real tragedy, which is the denial of the cross, right? So Breaking Bad is a tragedy story because Walter White denies the cross to the bitter end, and he dies in his own blood. And Better Call Saul is ultimately a Christian story, right? He lays down his life. And so, yeah, Christianity is a story that can't not be told. And you can imagine if you imagine like a bunch of demons in some writer's chamber in Hollywood, you know what I mean? I got a great story. There's a bad guy. Yeah. And he meets this girl, and she's also bad. Yeah. And their love transforms them, and they get married. Dang it, Beelzebub, that's the gospel again, man. You can't keep putting this stuff out there, right? And I don't think that everything that's produced by Hollywood is Christian. I'm not trying to say that. I just think it's really hard to produce compelling stories that aren't the gospel. When you produce something that's artistically compelling that is not essentially a gospel story, it usually is nihilism.
Yeah.
Right. It is hard to write a happy ending that doesn't demand two people to lay their lives down. Right. Jesus ruined everything.
Well, when you say like, yeah, it's hard to write an artistically good movie that doesn't have a happy ending, and often if you do, it's nihilism. I'm thinking of like La La Land, right? Like both of them at the end chase their dreams. They accomplish their dreams and they get their dreams, but you can tell at the end there's remnants of what ifs. There's remnants of, and then afterwards they play a whole 5-minute, like they play the song. Have you seen La La Land?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, sorry.
I started it. Everybody keeps telling me I got to, and so you're probably right. I started. I got.
Yeah, the ending is
I
what
started, and I was like,
I love the ending because it's so it's not what you expect. It's not what every movie is. So that's why I like it, because it's different. And also their usage of colors is really amazing and artistic, and how colors represent everything. But even at the end, when they recognize like, oh man, we both got what we want, but we don't have each other. We don't have this love. I'm going to spoil it. She's with someone else, and it's like, oh, maybe she's happy with this guy, but what if she was with this first guy, like what if she was with Ryan Gosling? Who knows?
Yeah.
And then they go and do a recap and they play the first time they meet, and then they show, here's what would have happened if they would have chose each other. And they show this whole what if story of if they had a happy ending. And you're left sitting there at the end like empty-handed, like what? There's the promise of love that this was building up to did not come true, because two people chose to go their own ways and put themselves first in their own life. Yeah. And that kind of sounds like nihilism, right? Like nothing matters. You just went after your own stuff. You got your wealth and stuff, but you're lonely.
Yeah, and I think we as Christians we're really good at oversimplifying things. We're like, okay, Christian stories end with happiness, non-Christian stories end with badness. Like, and that's I'm not trying to say this, right? Because I think good tragedy is also a Christian feature, right?
Of course.
Somebody who breaks God's laws and does not repent and does not lay down his life will be emptied, and it will be a living hell from the very beginning. That's actually the gospel too, right? Like the gospel doesn't mean happiness, right? And I think of certain movies, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, or you guys have listeners that you're responsible for, and I want to be sensitive. But I think there's like some movies where it's just like there is a happy ending, but it's like a kind of empty happy ending, and almost a kind of nihilism in that happiness also. Because I think one thing that our culture struggles with is we are drowning in this kind of surfeit of positivity. We are overwhelmed by this constant pressure. To be positive, to be happy. You've seen them like the marquee in coffee shops, good vibes only, right? Which that's totalitarian grammar, right?
That's true.
Good vibes or get out, right? That's the grammar of apartheid South in the U.S., right? Whites only, right? Good vibes only. There's no place in that world. Don't bring your bad vibes here, right? We go to church to feel positive. We don't go to church to lament and ask Yahweh to defend us against our enemies. And then something breaks out in Eastern Europe, and a bunch of Ukrainian Christians are praying for God to deliver them from their enemies. And we have American Christians still fighting in America. Like, I just really I'm struggling to be positive, and I'm not saying that there isn't real happiness, right? But the heart behind positivity is a resistance to things that are costly and negate us, right? That bring a negativity to what I want, my desires, that lay a cost and a burden on me. This goes back to the office, I guess, a little bit, right? When I have to give up something. And so I haven't seen La La Land, but from the way you described it, right? part of the false happy ending is this refusal to have your dreams negated by the one you love. No, I won't lay down myself for that. And that's not the way of life.
Right. That's amazing. As we continue in the episode, we are coming up just under an hour. We have a little bit of time left. I don't know if you're on a schedule or not, or how much time you have, but with whatever time we have left, let's move into Lord of the Rings, because there's so much there. I mean, a couple years ago, I made claims that you could give me any scene in Lord of the Rings and I'll make a sermon out of it. Like, that I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, read the books, owned the extended edition, seen the movies countless times, can almost quote the entire first movie. And so I'm always like, give me a scene and I'll make a sermon. So this is like what I'm excited to get into this. So what was the paper for the Lord of the Rings theological under or overtones about specifically, and then we can sidetrack and get on the other tangents of how great Lord of the Rings is.
Yeah, so I co-authored this paper. It became a chapter in an edited volume written by a bunch of theologians and scholars. Some of us were pastors, some of us were just theologians, some of us were literary critics and writers and fantasy writers and stuff. And it was a 2-volume series. It's out now, called Theology and Tolkien, edited by a guy named Douglas Estes. And me and my friend Chris Bruno, we co-authored a chapter on friendship in the Lord of the Rings. And so friendship in the Lord of the Rings is sort of looking at how it functions in the Lord of the Rings. It's interesting. Our claim was that it was Christian friendship. It was like a Johannine friendship, true friendship. True love is nobody better than he who lays down his life for his friend, John 15. And it's interesting because when Tolkien wrote it, right, the fantasy was just kind of coming of age, right, as a sort of formal, marketable consumer genre. And even today, but back then and even today, romantic love is the central love of most high fantasy and sci-fi. Romantic love, right? Boy beats the dragon and marries the girl, and that too has a Christian shape, and I'm not against that, right? But Tolkien did something interesting, which was kind of displace the romantic story, which is beautiful. Arwen and Aragorn, love it. It's great, and he was writing to the author of the editor of the Republic at the time a letter about why he chose to go with the friendship instead of making all about Aragorn and Arwen. Because if you have the books, you can read the rest of the Aragorn and Arwen story, but Tolkien moved it to the appendices, right? Which very few people read. Tolkien was the guy that assumed that readers would, but sorry, Tolkien. Right, but nobody really reads it, right? He frontlines the friendship. And even when the movies came out, I remember reading in Newsweek or Time or something as a high school kid, articles questioning whether Sam and Frodo had some romantic attraction to each other, and sort of these phrases like, "Oh, Master Frodo," "Oh, Sam," right? "Oh, see, they're definitely attracted," and I think that just that to me proves the problem that Tolkien was trying to address, which is we cannot handle love that is not romantic and sexual. There is no room for it. If you love, it must implicitly, in some Freudian way, be sexual, secretly, right? We don't know what to do with love that doesn't fit into this sort of consumer sexuality. And I think Tolkien says actually what overthrows the Dark Lord in this story, in this moment, in this fictional history, is the love of two friends, two brothers, right, who lay their lives down for each other. And I think we live in a culture that is devoid of friendship. We are starving for it. We are hungry for it. C.S. Lewis has this great line in his Four Loves, in his chapter on friendship, where he talks about when we read places in the Song of Roland or in the Iliad where we see these close friends weeping over each other, tears and kisses of affection for our brothers in arms, and we immediately go, how strange. We need to think for a second that if the universal witness of most of human history has been that close friends deeply show one another affection. Maybe we're the strange ones, where affection is only allowed between romantic partners. And so that was the work that we did with Tolkien. Was just looking at Tolkien, thinking about friendship, and how that might inform the way that we go about being friends.
Mm-hmm. That's so good, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how a lot of progressive Christians or people who want to attack Christianity will talk about how, oh, the Bible said David and Jonathan love each other more than they loved a woman or something like that. Then it's like, oh, they had some romantic relationship, and that kind of it exposes exactly what you were talking about that Tolkien was getting at, where we're not used to having close intimacy with anyone other than a romantic partner. And so that's even cool to see that. And it's cool. It's just observing it in culture. Like, wow, like this is still happening. It happened when Tolkien was writing, and it's happening now. And it'll be really cool. It'd be cool to talk to someone about that too, and say, like, if someone brought that up in a conversation, like, well, in the Old Testament, David and Jonathan, so maybe, it would be cool to say, well, actually, maybe, and then going into Tolkien's story, like, actually, even Lord of the Rings, a similar thing happened, and Tolkien did this to expose, and be a cool teaching moment to say, like, yeah, why can't we have close, intimate friendships outside of romantic partners?
Yeah, and we miss, if Christ as the bridegroom is one image that is true of Scripture, and it goes from Genesis to Revelation and ends in a wedding. Another central image is this image of God being our friend. God is friends with Abraham. Yahweh says to Miriam and Aaron, I speak to Moses as a man speaks to a friend face to face. Jesus, when he shows up, says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And so this idea of being a friend of Jesus is unique to us. And we think of friendships like sort of the 90s sort of Ferris Bueller type film, or like Breakfast Club, right? Kind of like a group of people that were all kind of misfits. We don't really have, like, in contemporary media, real depictions of close friendships in popular media, really intense, passionate, close friendships end with a romantic kiss, or more. And I think it'd be, and I think a lot of people are so hungry for friendship, real passionate friendship. I will never leave you or forsake you friendship. I think it's a needed place for Christianity to model that. A great movie, if you guys have ever seen, is the 1999 Tombstone, starring Val Kilmer plays Doc Holliday.
Oh yeah.
I haven't seen it.
And it was kind of, the runtime was long. The director, the first part of the movie is fantastic, and then it kind of just kind of falls apart at the end after they kill the bad guys. It drags on for like 30 minutes. You're like, oh my gosh, like stop it already, right? And that's because the director got kicked out. The production studio he lost control of the film, and the producer's like, wait, this is a movie about friendship? No, we're going to add another meaningless 20 minutes so that Wyatt Earp can marry the girl, right? And you're like, what? That's sad. He left his wife. Like this, I don't want. No, stop. It's a terrible. But he began it as a story in the Wild West, which is all about, the cowboy with the white hat killing the cowboy with the black hat and getting the little lady, right?
Yep.
That's like the Western trope. It began as a violation of the Western trope. No, this is a story about two good cowboy friends, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, who lay their lives down for each other. And there's a scene in the middle of it that's and Val Kilmer's fantastic, where two guys that are getting paid to be a part of Wyatt Earp's posse to hunt down the bad guys. They're like, well, why are you doing this, Doc? You're like dying of tuberculosis and you're not even getting paid. And Doc Holliday says, Wyatt Earp is my friend. And one of the guys goes, well, heck, I got a lot of friends. And Doc Holliday goes, I don't. And I think I just get teary-eyed every time I think that. I think, man, if you're in ministry at all, or if you're a pastor at all, especially, yeah, I don't. Right? You feel that everybody's my friend and nobody's my friend. Like, you feel that. I think this is, maybe you guys can delete this or make me look like I'm saying something else, right? But I think especially in the era where we have superstar ministry celebrities who are falling, and we're all like, we put on this pretense of horrification. What? We let them get paid whatever they wanted and do whatever they wanted and jet set all over the place, and their TikTok was always them working out shirtless, and they fell? Oh, you're like, okay, stop. Like, we need to stop being pretended. We have to roll back our pretense at moral indignance. I think, man, those guys don't have friends. They're celebrities, and and what would a real friend, not a yes man on your ministry board, what would a real friend have done for a few of those guys in their situation? We're dying in the West. If Christianity is dying in the West, we're dying because of a dearth of close, lay down your life friendships.
Wow.
So
it's powerful. Yeah.
How do we gain that back? We just change the sentiment of ministry, or just make it culturally more normative, or what do you think?
Small groups forced. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from you. I'm the rector, so I wonder if even the way that I'm thinking about it is a little bit different. I wonder what was your guys' experience with deep friendships, because although you guys are in ministry, it's a little bit different, but I wonder, like, you also send out, you guys are also leaving your friends every 6 months, and they then like disappear and they show up in Europe. And
well, that's I would say one of the hardest parts about YWAM is that you make close friends, then everyone leaves.
Yeah.
Like, I'm moving in March off island for probably forever.
Yeah.
And so Derry will be the last one from our friend group here. And it's like, we've watched all of our close friends over the last like 5 years. Like, oh, we're best friends. Then I leave. I'm like, all right, hey, we're best friends. Oh, you left. Okay, cool. And so it's kind of a similar thing where it's like, yeah, we're all friends on base, but at some point it's gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, we're all friends, but I'm not as close of friends with anyone on base as I am friends with Derry, right? Like, Derry is the closest friend I have in Hawaii. And so it's like, yeah, we're all friends here, but like, me and Derry are boys, right? I guess if you're thinking about, like, if we're questioning how to cultivate that type of friendship, I don't know how much I could speak into like the everyday person's life, because I live in a community of like 50 people that all live and work together. So we're around each other a ton. And so that kind of adds to the ability to have friendships. But I would think if I was like having a normal job and going to church on Sundays and maybe middle of the week or something like that.
Because you don't go now.
Yeah, I don't go to church now. I'm in YWAM. I don't need to. Just kidding. I go every week.
Okay. We'll talk about that another time.
I'm joking. I'm just not going when the Lions are playing, because it's the first time in my lifetime they've been in the playoffs, which has only caused me to miss one Sunday. Anyways,
hey, don't get defensive. This is a safe place. You seem like you feel the need to.
Listen, I go to church. Okay. Keep getting worse.
I'm not angry. I'm not being defensive.
I'm not defensive. I just want everyone to know I go to church.
Yeah.
But I would think, small groups are a good way, I think, for the church community, because they're a place for people to go to have more time to get to know each other. But I think really like intentional hangouts, and I'm an extrovert, so this doesn't sound like a heavy burden to me, but it'd be fun to, like, if I had neighbors, right, to have neighbors over. If my wife and I lived in a neighborhood where we just moved in, it's like, hey, let's how many neighbors do we have around us? How much can we get dinner with these people and actually build friendships and kind of if you want deep friendships, are you someone who's pursuing people to have deep friendships in a sense? Does that make sense? Like, if you want it, go get it. And if it all depended on you, would you do it? Is kind of how it is. Because one thing we have with the YWAM is that our younger staff will come on base and then can feel upset that no one is asking them to hang out, or if that happens, they're like, hey, no one's reaching out to me. Like, and it's a complaint that it's a normal experience in YWAM. And I'll tell some of the people who come on staff, like, hey, if you want to hang out with people, you have to ask them, because some people have been here for like 4 years and have their rhythms, and they're not concerned with stopping their rhythms. And like, they're not thinking right now, okay, I need to stop my rhythm to attend to this person. It's like they're going on the river. You just entered the river. And so if you want to hang out with them, they're open. No one's against hanging out, but they're just not being cognizant in a sense. And so I think, going after it and creating spaces where people can have friendships, being someone that people can trust. Building trust with people takes a long time. So I would say, no, it's going to take a while, but just be consistent at it. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to be super huge in a week, but if you go consistently for 2 years, you're going to look more defined.
I have a few thoughts. First, I think the most obvious one is what we've been talking about, how, at least in media, there's an overvaluing of finding someone you're supposed to be with forever and then getting married. I think in the church, especially for guys, like, man, I can't wait till I can like get married, and mostly so like you don't have to be horny anymore.
Well,
But-
you can still the horniness doesn't stop.
Right. But you have some sort of outlet for it. But we don't think about the relationship aspect of it because, at least for younger guys, it's easy to have close friends. A lot easier, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not as busy. And so you have school, you're with your boys, like, and it's sad when the boys ends, it's like when high school's over, like all those good times, those adventures, maybe you have a reunion every once in a while, but sort of that's over unless you have like college boys or something like that.
Right. There's
You know
no
what I
more longboarding through the night at 2 a.m. because you have no responsibilities. It's
Yeah,
like
and we
people
neglect
got kids now.
we neglect those relationships, and we're like, and even the whole time you're in those, you're like, man, I can't wait till I have like the perfect relationship, and I'm like with a girl, and we sort of neglect those, maybe for cultural reasons, maybe for some other reasons as well. But I think because we overemphasize, possibly, not that marriage needs to be any less important in our culture, because it's already becoming less important just for everybody in the America's culture, at least, right, or the Western culture. In a way, the relationship between a man and a woman is greatly overemphasized versus just like two guys hanging out or two girls or whatever, and it's not viewed as essential, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so that combined, in my opinion, with how overworked people make themselves sometimes, and can be from other reasons, leads to you not being able to find people to hang out with, not having the time to actually invest in those relationships, and the culture not valuing them at all to make you go in that direction anyway. So even if you had the time, like you wouldn't naturally be drawn to that, but you're lonely, you don't know why, and we're undervaluing like those kinds of relationships or the value that comes from same gender relationships.
Yeah. And in our experience, I know that's really, yeah, I think that's fair. The different valuing. Yeah. And it's weird because like I can share my thoughts, but I feel like they're more theoretical because I can't speak to the person who, yeah, like you have like 6 kids, and so you're pretty busy. So I can't speak to what it's like to have a whole family and kids and then try to also fit a social life in there when you get a full-time job and you're having a healthy marriage and you're raising kids. It's like, wow. And especially when they're young, I'd imagine it's pretty hard. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you could if there was a way to have a few people that were committed to like meet monthly, at least once a month and hang out, where it's like, hey, I'm going to commit to, for the next year, we're going to meet once a month, where this will be blocked out. So then the family's aware of the time, so you can make space for it. You can have, and then it'll just be a time just to build friendship.
Yeah, intentionality, I feel like, is super important. But at least what's a problem for me when building those friendships, and what's kind of an obstacle to that, is my version of deep is, I don't think, a real version of being deep, and it causes me not to create actual deep friendships. My version of deep, and I think a lot of guys, is we're talking about something intellectual. And so we're being intellectually deep, but are we being emotionally deep? Are we actually connecting and talking about how we are and stuff like that? So when I actually am in a small group, or I am hanging out with a friend or something like that, I stray away from actually being deep, and I'm just being intellectual and being stimulating intellectually, but not actually taking care of my emotional need within this friendship and actually gaining an intimacy and going deeper with this person.
Yeah, especially as guys, we're not keen on being emotional and being vulnerable in emotion with each other. I love you, man.
Love you too.
Yeah. I wonder. I mean, part of me, maybe a couple. Yeah, I just wonder. I have a couple thoughts, not answers, but like thoughts. One is I wonder how much of our emotional inactivity in our current culture is how much that's a historical moment, and how much that's maybe not true of every culture that's ever been around, but how much that's true of our culture right now, right? Where we've been sort of strictly catechized in a de-emotionalized, sheerly biological masculinity that's driven largely by the size of our shoulders and our chromosomes, right? And so I wonder if, we have records like other cultures, men were far more okay with being emotionally expressive. So then the question becomes, why? What's at work in us that causes us to, get worse in this area? I wonder. I had a thought while Derry was talking. It was about the overemphasis of marriage. And I think in my mind, like, this is how idolatry and you can say the same thing about addiction, but this is how idolatry works, is when you make something an idol, it means that both, a couple things, that everything gets out of place, so nothing gets enjoyed. Nothing else that's not the idol gets enjoyed, right? Everything else kind of has to serve the idol. But also, you actually don't get to enjoy the idol, right? The idol, by making something an idol that shouldn't be there, it actually prohibits you from, or inhibits you from actually enjoying the thing you've made an idol. And so the great example is like alcohol, right? Like, what is an alcoholic? It's not somebody who enjoys wine too much. It's somebody who has made wine God and therefore can never enjoy it because they can never enjoy it enough, right? It's lost all of its actual meaning. Somebody who makes their marriage an idol is not somebody who loves their wife enough. It's somebody who can actually is no longer able to enjoy their wife because they've made their marriage an idol, and now it's all stress and servitude to this idol, right? And so I wonder if part of, like, we've made not so much marital love. It's not like a bunch of Americans are wandering around with too great of a desire for a healthy marriage. Lord, if that was the case, right?
Yeah, right.
It's this sort of sex devoid of any meaning beyond physical pleasure has become the idol, right? Animal sex. And because of that, a couple things happen. One, our marriages are falling apart because they're no longer in the right place. Everything's out of order. And our friendships have deteriorated, or we feel this need to turn all of our friendships into a place to experience sexuality. And I would say a third thing has happened, which is we're actually also no longer really enjoying healthy sexuality. A study came out maybe 5 years ago. It was a longitudinal study, which is like Americans are less sexed now than we've ever been in our culture's history, right? Precisely because we've made it this idol, right? We're terrified of it. We don't know what to do. It's just everything's terrible. We hate it. We love it. We hate it. And so I just wonder, part of that is culturally to get back to having friendship in first place. There needs to be a work of the Spirit to sort of put some of our loves into right order. That's my reflections as you were talking, I think. The Office also has a bunch of stuff to say about friendship, right? Dwight and Jim becoming best friends.
Yeah.
It's a really fun story. Oscar and Kevin becoming friends. The friendship begins to turn in season 3. Them becoming best friends is super cool. There's all these little pairings of friends throughout The Office that become really significant later on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Love it. That's definitely like a conversation that needs to be had, and probably had more, which we could do a whole podcast episode on the need for friendship and the value of friendship. Because I don't know if I haven't heard much emphasis on it. It's friendship's always this thing that feels like people just assume people have. And so
we did talk to a guy named Peter Valk a while ago, who's he's gay but celibate, and he talks about creating communities of people who you're committed to, similar to a marriage, not like for your entire life, but you're committed to, you make a commitment to, of like, we will be there for each other because we can't be there like for like a partner because they're gay. And
or it's just celibate. Like if someone if like a straight guy could feel called to be single for life, and so he could join a community where it's like, hey, I feel like
celibacy is not just the answer to same-sex attraction.
Right.
Like, there's several people that can be celibate.
Right. And so it's for people who are celibate to commit to, or guys in this case to be celibate to commit to each other.
Yeah. In friendship, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I appreciate you guys' time. I wonder if I was a listener and I had just subbed to your YouTube channel and had asked a friend to do so the episode, and I heard now that you're leaving in March and you're going to the mainland forever. Can I just ask, what's the future for this podcast?
Well, we're gonna keep going. We've done this podcast from Asia for 4 years, from different continents and different states. So, like right now, we have this amazing studio gifted to us by a church in our valley, but we've done it like last summer. I was home getting married, so I was home for 4 months, and we just did it Skype. And then when I've been in Asia, we've done a couple episodes. When you've been in Asia, we've done episodes.
Yeah.
We bank them.
We're used to it.
Yeah. This is probably the most continuous and most mobile or continuous mobile podcast I can think of. I don't know any podcast where the hosts move around so much but they're still consistent.
Yeah, we have over 200 episodes, so.
Yeah, which I find I'm like pat on our back. I'm like, we're committed, you know. But I think we also like it because we like having intellectual conversations, and we're friends, so it's just like a phone call.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm checking our subs. Oh, 2 away from 400, which means we're almost halfway to being able to live stream, listeners. Do you want to see us play Minecraft and talk to you guys
about theology?
Yeah, we were just talking about like just playing video games while we're doing that.
There's a great need for more Minecraft theology.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes. We would call it things you don't hear in Minecraft. It's things you don't hear.
There you go. Well,
hilarious. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. We've loved the conversation.
Yeah, it's been really great. What were those names? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's been awesome talking to you guys.
I was gonna say, what are the names of those papers if people wanted to get a hold of them, or the book that your papers are in, so people wanted to check those out?
Yeah. So a couple places. One is the church I'm the pastor of is called the All Saints. We put out a blog like every Monday, and there was a season where I was, and actually throughout every maybe 5 weeks there will be one, because of how much I love The Office. There will be one that is looking at something in The Office on a theological level. So you can always read our blog and sort of search for the keyword Office, and there's several blog posts there that sort of think through The Office. Then the two, same with Lord of the Rings. I love Lord of the Rings. Stuff that I've written on Lord of the Rings will appear on the blog as well. The two sort of formal book chapters that we sort of talked about. The Tolkien chapter is in the first volume of a 2-volume series called Theology and Tolkien, edited by Douglas Estes. And then the other one is in a forthcoming edited book called Religion, Theology, and the Office, edited by, I forget my editor's names. One of them is McCormick, and I forget the other. Oh, no, I feel so bad for it. One sec. I'll look his name up. 1 second.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. Do you have any other books that are currently out or anything you want to plug?
We don't have to plug it, but I do have Chris Berner, the guy that wrote the Tolkien paper with me, has sort of written some back pieces for a new book that another buddy and I have written. A guy named Drew Knowles, who's a pastor in Texas. Him and I wrote a book that'll be coming out this spring called Hospitality. It's thinking through the kingdom of God and the practices of being hospitable and laying feasts for people.
Wow.
So Hospitality, will come out sometime this year.
Sweet. Maybe when that comes out, we'll have you back on to talk about it.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Grateful for you guys.
Sweet.
Right on. Well, everybody, go check out those papers. Be convicted by The Office and Lord of the Rings, but ultimately the Spirit of God. And have a great week.